Every December, we're told to look back, to reflect, to assess. And if you're anything like me, or most of the people who stay at least semi-plugged in to the news, that reflection can feel heavy before it even begins. Because the loudest memories of any year are rarely the gentle ones. They're the emergencies, the arguments, the heartbreaks, the moments when it felt like the world was wobbling on its axis and nobody could quite steady it. But here's the quieter truth that doesn't make breaking news chyrons. History isn't only shaped by the loudest moments. It's shaped by the stubborn, steady presence of goodness. The kind that doesn't trend, doesn't shout, doesn't ask to be seen. And if you slow down enough to really take a look, if you turn the volume down on the noise just a little, you realize something remarkable. Even in 2025, even in a year that tested patience, compassion, and endurance, people still showed up. They helped. They loved. They rebuilt. They invented. They protected. They laughed in places where laughter felt almost inappropriate and did it anyway. So for this last episode of 2025, I'm doing something different. Much like I've gotten in the habit of ending weekly episodes on a high note, I'm ending the year by choosing to remember the year not just for what weighed on us, but for what was there to carry us through. This week's rant is dedicated entirely to the moments that restored faith, lifted spirits, and reminded us why being human is still worth the effort. This is some of the good news from 2025. Happy holidays, everyone. You're listening to Your Neighbor on the Left, the podcast where we talk about liberal politics, human decency, and life on the blue side of America's ideological divide. My name is Don Spielis, and I am your host. So let's get right to it. Looking around the internet to locate some of the year's collection of uplifting stories from around the world, one thing became immediately clear. Good news rarely arrives under perfect conditions. Again and again, the common thread wasn't ease, it was persistence. It was people deciding, consciously or instinctively, that hardship would not be the final word. That spirit was captured vividly in the Philippines, where a couple, Jefferson and Jason, chose to go forward with their wedding even as a powerful typhoon flooded their town. Streets disappeared under murky water, guests waded through knee-deep currents. In photographs taken by Associated Press, we see the couple stand soaked in knee-deep water, but smiling as they exchange vows while nature does its worst. It would have completely been reasonable to postpone. Instead, they leaned into the moment. Their wedding became less about flowers and seating charts and more about the promise itself, that they would stand together even when conditions were far from ideal. In a year defined by uncertainty, that image landed like a quiet vow to all of us. Storms pass, but commitment endures. A similar kind of resolve emerged from Southern California, where wildfires tore through communities, displacing families and reducing familiar landscapes to ash. Among those affected was a youth theater group led by Lee Scarrett, who suddenly found themselves without a rehearsal space, and in some cases, without homes. They were in the middle of preparing a production of Crazy for You, and canceling would have made sense, but instead of retreating, they regrouped. Parents offered help, the community opened doors, and the kids showed up. When the show finally went on, it wasn't just entertainment. It felt like restoration. Applause filled a space that had recently known heavy loss, and for a few hours people remembered what joy feels like when it's shared. Some of the most meaningful good news of 2025 came not from dramatic scenes, but from small, deeply human moments that cut through the abstraction of history. When journalist Josh Funk interviewed the brother of the newly elected Pope Leo XIV, formerly Robert Prevost, the conversation was interrupted by a phone ringing in the basement. It turned out it was the Pope himself. The exchange that followed wasn't theological or political. It was family talk, travel plans, jokes, the kind of conversation millions of people have every day, except this time it happened to involve the leader of the Catholic Church. It was grounding, almost disarming, and it reminded us that behind every historic moment is a human being still tethered to ordinary relationships. That humanity surfaced again at 3:45 in the morning when Dr. Claudia Golden, an economist at Harvard, was awakened by an unexpected knock at the door. An Associated Press photographer stood there to tell her she had just won the Nobel Prize in economics. Her reaction? Disbelief, laughter, emotion slowly giving way to awe, was unguarded and real. In an era where achievement is often met with skepticism or backlash, that moment felt refreshingly pure. Recognition earned through years of work, arriving not with fanfare, but with quiet joy in the middle of the night. While some good news arrived as moments, other breakthroughs unfolded steadily, reshaping lives in ways that won't always make headlines but will echo for generations. In 2025, needle-free epinephrine nasal sprays became widely available, transforming emergency care for people with severe allergies. For parents like Melissa Figueroa, whose child lives with the constant threat of anaphylaxis, this wasn't just a convenience, it was liberation from panic. Fewer steps, faster response, less fear layered on top of an already frightening situation. Researchers also made real progress toward solving the global organ shortage crisis. Teams working with MIT successfully advanced functional 3D printed kidney prototypes, bringing us closer to a future where transplant waitlists are no longer a grim countdown. For patients like Darnell Harris, who has spent years on dialysis, this wasn't abstract science. It was hope backed by data, the kind that makes tomorrow feel a little less fragile. Public health victories continued quietly but powerfully. In India's Tamil Nadu region, a large-scale cervical cancer vaccination initiative expanded dramatically in 2025, offering free protection to thousands of young girls. Health officials estimate the program will prevent tens of thousands of deaths over the coming decades. These aren't just numbers off a chart. They are families spared a devastating loss. Globally, education also delivered one of the year's most hopeful milestones. More girls are in school worldwide than ever before. In regions where education for girls has historically been restricted or undervalued, classrooms filled with young women represent a long arc bending toward opportunity, autonomy, and generational change. It's the kind of progress that doesn't shout, but quietly rewrites futures. Environmental news, so often dominated by dread, offered moments of genuine optimism as well. In 2025, renewable energy officially overtook coal globally. China alone installed more than 1 terawatt of solar capacity in just the first half of the year. A staggering leap forward in clean energy transition. This wasn't symbolic, it was structural. It showed that large-scale change isn't theoretical anymore. It's actually happening. Nature responded in encouraging ways. The largest coral reef restoration project ever, completed successfully, restored over 500 hectares of reef, giving marine ecosystems a fighting chance against warming seas. In Britain, researchers observed young ash trees developing increased genetic resistance to ash dieback disease, offering hope that a species once thought doomed may recover with a little human support. These weren't miracles. They were the result of patience, science, and a willingness to intervene thoughtfully rather than destructively. In space exploration, 2025 continued to push boundaries. Robotic lunar missions expanded our understanding of the moon, while international cooperation in space research reached new levels, reminding us that curiosity can still unite countries that struggle to agree on almost anything else. There was something deeply comforting about watching humanity look outward together instead of inward in conflict. Some of the most moving stories of the year came from people who dedicated themselves to restoring not just hope, but literal sight. Pediatric ophthalmologists working across Africa helped restore vision to hundreds of thousands of children through innovative and accessible programs. For these kids, the impact wasn't abstract. It was immediate. School became possible. Independence became a real possibility. Futures widened. Young people continued to lead in ways that, to be honest, put adults to shame in the best possible way. A young girl named Chajazvi Manoj, named Time's Kid of the Year, built an online platform to protect seniors from digital scams after watching her grandfather struggle. 12-year-old Rebecca Young in Scotland invented a solar-powered backpack with a built-in heating blanket for unhoused individuals. 8-year-old Mateo Acosta in Chicago gave away his entire birthday fund to help someone in need, unknowingly igniting a community movement that far outgrew his small donation. And then there were the moments of unplanned heroism. At Bondi Junction in Sydney, Ahmed Al-Ahmed tackled an armed attacker, putting his own life on the line to save others. In Texas, Coast Guard rescue swimmer Scott Ruskin coordinated the evacuation of 165 people during catastrophic floods. In New York City, subway conductor Ray McKee jumped onto the tracks to save an unconscious teenager seconds before a train arrived. None of these people were looking to be heroes. They simply acted when the moment demanded it. And I'm going to bet that you never heard any of those names before now. After that tragedy struck at Bondi Junction, the response didn't stop with bravery. A movement called One Mitzvah for Bondi emerged, led by Rabbi Noam Shapiro, and embraced by people of all backgrounds. Instead of letting grief calcify into fear or hatred, the community chose action, hospital visits, volunteer work, acts of kindness offered in the names of the victims. It became a living reminder that love is not passive and unity is not accidental. Not all of the year's good news was dramatic. Some of it was achingly simple. A California student named Brody Nunez left handwritten notes and flowers on every car in a hospital parking lot after visiting his mother, each one reading, "You are perfect." A tortoise named Myrtle was reunited with her family after being displaced by a Mississippi tornado. A school district in Albuquerque launched a Good News Ambassador program, formally dedicating space to celebrating everyday achievements. These moments mattered precisely because they were small, because they were human. What all of these stories share is something essential. They didn't happen because the world was calm. They happened because people chose to show up anyway. Goodness in 2025 didn't wait for permission. It persisted through exhaustion and uncertainty and fear. And that matters because the stories we tell shape the world we believe we live in. If all we tell are stories of collapse, we convince ourselves collapse is inevitable. But when we make room for stories of resilience and compassion and progress, we remember something vital. Humanity is unfinished, still learning, still trying, still capable of surprise. So, as we close the book on 2025, it's worth remembering that history isn't just written by presidents and wars or breaking news alerts. It's also written by couples who marry in storms and by kids who choose generosity over comfort, by scientists who refuse to stop asking difficult questions, and by strangers who run toward danger when others can't. These stories don't erase all the pain and frustration of the past year, and they aren't meant to. They exist alongside it with many, many others, steadying us, reminding us why effort still matters. As we step into 2026, my hope is simple, that you notice the good when it appears, protect it when it's fragile, and contribute to it when you can. May the coming year bring you health, connection, laughter, purpose, and hopefully moments that restore your faith, not just in the world, but in yourself and those around you. From your neighbor on the left, I want to thank you for listening to all the episodes that you may have downloaded this year, including this one. As always, I'd love for you to reach out and share your thoughts with the podcast. You can do so by using any of the social media platforms that the podcast uses. The links for those are all on the Linktree page, and the Linktree address is in the episode description. But again, thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And here's to a new year, hopefully filled with humanity at its best. Your neighbor on the left will be taking a short break as we enter the new year. The next brand new full episode will arrive on January 13th, so I hope you'll be joining me then. But between then and now, stay engaged, stay kind, and have the kind of year you'd wish for others.